When she awoke the next morning, Elias had cleaned her wound and bandaged her with strips of cloth. She lay on his cot, blinking at the wooden beams of the ceiling, clearly disoriented. "You're safe," Elias said, setting a bowl of warm broth nearby. "I found you in the forest. You were hurt." She turned her golden eyes to him, studying him with a quiet intensity. Then she spoke in a language that sounded like music woven with bells and echoes. Elias shook his head. "I don't understand you," he said gently. She frowned, then closed her eyes briefly as if concentrating. When she opened them again, her voice had changed, halting, accented but in his own tongue. "You saved me." Elias stared in surprise. "You can speak our language." "I learn quickly," she said, struggling over the words. He nodded slowly. "What's your name?" There was a pause. Her lips trembled slightly, as if revealing her true identity would cost her something. Then she said, "Liara." It was only much later that Elias would realize she had not given her full name. Days passed as Liara recovered in his cabin. She remained quiet, reserved, often gazing out the window as if searching the horizon for something. Elias noticed the way she moved, graceful, deliberate, like someone raised in courts of power rather than in the wilderness. But he said nothing. He taught her words she struggled with, shared with her the food he had, and in return she watched him with an expression he couldn't decipher, part gratitude, part sorrow. At night, when Elias stoked the fire, he sometimes heard her whispering in her own language, words heavy with grief, whispers of pursuit. One evening, as the sky burned orange with sunset, Liara stiffened suddenly at the sound of distant engines. Elias stepped outside and saw faint streaks of fire descending through the atmosphere. "Dropships." "Hunters," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Hunters?" Elias asked. "They seek me." Her hands shook as she clutched at his arm. "You must not let them find me." Elias's heart raced. Who was this girl really, that others would come across the stars to capture her? That night, Elias made the decision to move her deeper into the forest, away from the cabin. They built a small hideout in a cave concealed by thick vines. As days passed, he began to see flashes of who Liara truly was. She carried herself with authority, even when weakened. Her words carried weight, her gestures subtle commands. And sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, her hand brushed against a pendant she wore around her neck, a silver crest shaped like twin wings wrapped around a star. He recognized it faintly. During his childhood, before the expansion wars, he had seen it in old reports. It was the crest of the Scifistory Dominion, one of the most powerful alien empires in the galaxy. And then it struck him. Liara wasn't just anyone. She was royalty. The truth revealed. One night, after they had narrowly avoided patrols scouring the forest, Elias finally asked, "Who are you really, Liara?" She looked at him for a long time, the firelight dancing in her golden eyes. Then slowly she spoke. "I am Liara Seraphis, firstborn daughter of the High Throne, Queen of the Scifistory Dominion." Elias felt his chest tighten. Queen. The very queen of a civilization once feared across the galaxy was lying in hiding in his care. "I should have told you sooner," she continued, lowering her gaze. "But trust is a fragile thing. My enemies staged a coup. They seek my life, and in their pursuit my vessel was shot down. I fell to this world." Elias exhaled slowly. Everything made sense now. The hunters, the crest, her commanding presence. "Why tell me?" he asked quietly. "Because," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I cannot survive without your help. And because you have shown me kindness no one else would." For a long time, silence hung between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Then Elias nodded. "Then I'll protect you," he said firmly. The invasion. Their peace didn't last long. The hunters grew more aggressive, deploying scouts that swept through villages and burned farmland in search of their quarry. Rumors spread among the colonists of strange soldiers scouring the land, and fear took root. Elias and Liara knew they couldn't hide forever. She revealed that her pendant was more than a symbol. It was a beacon, a distress signal keyed only to loyalists who still served her. If she could activate it fully, her fleet might come to retrieve her. But to do so, they needed power, more than Elias's modest cabin could provide. The only source was the abandoned comms relay on the ridge, left from the early colonization days. It was risky. The hunters would be watching. Together, they journeyed through the forest, evading patrols, until they reached the relay. Elias fought off 2 scouts with his rifle while Liara, weak but determined, interfaced with the ancient systems using her pendant. Sparks flew as she worked, her golden eyes glowing with concentration. Finally, the beacon pulsed to life, sending a burst of energy into the night sky. But their signal did not go unnoticed. The hunters descended upon them, armored figures with weapons that shimmered with deadly light. Elias stood his ground, firing until his rifle overheated. He fought desperately, but he was only one man against many. Just as a blade arced toward him, Liara stepped forward, her pendant blazing. A wave of radiant energy erupted from her, hurling the hunters back. She stood tall, her wounds forgotten, her presence commanding. In that moment, Elias truly saw her, not the injured girl he had saved, but the queen she was destined to be. "Leave him," she commanded in a voice that shook the air. "It is I you want." The hunters faltered, kneeling instinctively despite themselves. Such was the power of her lineage. And then the sky thundered. Vast ships descended through the clouds, bearing the crest of Seraphis. Loyalist forces poured out, driving back the hunters. The forest lit up with the fury of battle, but in the end, the hunters were defeated, their coup broken. The farewell. When the dust settled, Elias stood beside Liara at the forest's edge. She was no longer the wounded girl he had carried from the shadows. She wore the mantle of a queen, her loyalists bowing before her. Yet when she turned to Elias, her golden eyes softened. "You saved me when I was nothing but a stranger," she said. "You gave me kindness, shelter, and trust. I will never forget." Elias felt a lump rise in his throat. "So this is goodbye. For now," she whispered. "But know this, should you ever call upon me, the Queen of Seraphis will answer." She reached out and placed her pendant against his chest. It shimmered, then split into 2 halves, one half around her neck, the other now hanging from a chain she pressed into his hand. "A bond," she said softly, "between us." And then she was gone, carried into the stars by her people, her fleet vanishing into the heavens. Elias stood alone in the forest once more, the pendant heavy in his palm. Yet he knew he was not the same man who had wandered those woods weeks ago, for he had saved a queen, and in return, had been given a bond that would transcend worlds.